Welcome to Alzheimer Speaks Radio. I'm your host, Lori LeBay, and I'm so excited that you're joining us today. We are going to have a fascinating conversation as usual as we learn from people all around the world at all ages and stages of life. Stay tuned as we shift our dementia care from crisis to comfort.
Here we go. What you think about, you will bring about.
Well, hi, everyone, and welcome to Alzheimer Speaks Radio. I'm your host, Lori LeBay, and I'm thrilled that you can join us today. If you enjoyed our opening music, it's called Clearing Call by the Mark Arneson Band. You can download it on any of your favorite music platforms. For those of you that are new to our show, Alzheimer Speaks is about sound information, not just sound bites. We like to have real conversations with real people. So if you want to share your story, please reach out to me at radio@alzheimerspeaks.com. We're always open to hearing what others are doing. And if you haven't checked out Dementia Map, please do so. It's a global resource directory that also has a calendar of events and a blog and a glossary of terms. So there's lots of great information to mine, and it's free, and you're not asked for any personal information either. And if you provide a service and want to get in on Dementia Map, you can grab a free listing, or we also have 2 enhanced listings as well. Feel free to reach out to me for more information, or just go to dementiamap.com. Also want to give a shout out to Arthur's Memory Cafe. We gather the second and fourth Wednesday of each month at 1 o'clock Central Time. We do that virtually. Anybody can come to that. That is for people living with dementia as well as their care partners. And then on the last Wednesday of the month, Brookdale North Oaks sponsors an in-person gathering called Caregiver Connect, where we meet the last Wednesday of the month at 10 o'clock. And the person with dementia will get some respite care during that time. Again, reach out to me for more information. And then if you happen to be in Minnesota as well, on May 25th from 5:30 to 7:30, I will be at the Friendship Village in Bloomington and be doing a presentation called As the Cookie Crumbles. That is free, and you are welcome to attend. That is specifically intended for professionals. And then I want to give a shout out to the Memory Camp, which is at Moon Beach in Wisconsin from August 15th to the 18th. You can reach out to them to register your family to go. And that number is 715-479-8255. And let's see, I have to mention Maud's Awards. You only have until Monday, May 16th to get your application in to win $5,000 for an individual or up to $25,000 for an organization that is doing good work in the arena of dementia care. And then Maud's Ventures has 3 different criteria. They are giving seed money, $50,000 to $100,000 on that. So you can go to maudsawards.org or maudsventures.org for more information there. We are going to hear from the Adaptive Equipment and Caregiving Corner as they talk a little bit about the footbar walker, and then we're going to be right back with our guest today, which I'm really excited to talk to, because we're going to be talking about legacy and learning to document the journey. So we'll see you in just a few.
I love the footbar walker, and let me tell you why. It is the option for my toolbox that I've been waiting for. Let's be honest, there are some clients who, despite our best rehab efforts, just aren't able to return to performing a sit-to-stand transfer on their own. Now I can offer my caregivers an easier, safer option that doesn't involve hoisting their loved one up from a sitting position. I don't recommend this walker for all of my clients, but I do recommend this walker for those caregivers looking for an easier, safer option with transfers. I would also encourage other therapists to add this walker to their toolbox. It's kind of like having my own mobile parallel bars for the client to pull up on. Whether it's a family caregiver at home helping a loved one with Parkinson's or dementia, CNAs in a long-term care facility assisting their patients, or therapists adapting to client and caregiver specific needs, we now have a very safe and effective option to offer in the footbar walker. Check this product out at thefootbarwalker.com. That's it for today from Adaptive Equipment and Caregiving Corner. Have a great day, and don't forget, if you can't do it, adapt it.
Okay, we are back, and I get to introduce you to George Slade, who is a writer and photographer based here in the Twin Cities in Minnesota. He is the author of My Father's Shirt, which documents his father's journey with dementia, as well as George's journey alongside him. He also works for our friends at Gentle Transitions, which is the Twin Cities' original senior move manager. Well, George, I'm so excited to have you join the show today. I think your journey is an important one. You've documenting it a little bit different than the norm out there. And I love variety. I think it inspires people to look at themselves and what they can do differently. And I think it's really empowering. So thank you for taking the time to be with us today. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, Lori. It's great to be here.
Yeah, I always start with the same question for all of my guests. And that is, I've mentioned that, your father had dementia, but sometimes there's other family or friends that you've dealt with as well. Can you give us just kind of an inside peek in terms of how you've been touched by the process and the people?
Oh, I'd only known Alzheimer's and dementia in other forms from a distance in the past. So with my father, it was like jumping into the deep end from the very outset. As I think about the deep end, though, it's kind of a shallow pool that gets deeper and deeper and deeper until you realize that your feet aren't on the ground anymore. And then you're really swimming in it because of the changes that happen so slowly.
It's interesting when you said from the onset, because we think of the onset of the disease, but it really affects everybody around.
Oh, absolutely.
Them as well. And I think sometimes that's so ignored. It's the process we're all going through along with the person who's diagnosed, and the visualization of the shallow pool and then walking and going, I thought this was the shallow end. What happened here? Throw me something. It gets kind of overwhelming.
I think that that doing the book was what really enabled me to feel that decline, to really, slide into it a little bit more easily than maybe my siblings were able to, because I was close to him for a period of 3 years, longer, photographing and taking notes. So it really enabled me to get a sense of his smaller changes and the incremental nature of that journey.
I was going to save this question for later, but it seems appropriate now. Did you find when you were writing that you saw things you didn't see before when you were on the journey?
Absolutely. Well, it's funny because the writing and the photography happened very close together. For the majority of the pieces in the book, I would photograph in the morning and probably that evening go home and write an Instagram post. And it took me a long time to think of posting on Instagram as actually writing. But I realized once I started, I was aware of editing and moving words around and the thought that had to go into creating the words, that I was definitely writing. So it's not a form that a lot of people are used to looking at in terms of serious issues. People are more accustomed to seeing pictures of their dinner or, their friends' cats. For me, Instagram became a really important way of getting support, having a network, really sharing my impressions and the way that other people who had experienced the journey were able to chime in with me as well. And that meant so much to me.
So with Instagram, some of our listeners might not, have experience on that. Are you limited to a word count at all, like you are on Twitter and things like that? Or
There's no limit to the word count. Twitter is really sort of sound bite or visual bite centric, and Facebook is about your friends, and Instagram, I think, is about the sharing. Really, I just come to feel like it's the space where I can share my thoughts and images that happen to go along with them. So the images and the writing kind of happen together. And there's some pieces in the book that required me to look back over the whole 4 years of the picture making and do some new writing to make the book all fit together. Like I had to explain what Instagram was to some people.
Oh, I'm sure.
How to look at it, and what kind of an app it is.
Oh, I can totally believe that. Now I have your book here. You shared this with me, and I so appreciate it. And I have to ask right away, your title of your book is My Father's Shirts. On the back side here, you've got a few of them. How did you pick that title?
Well, you'll notice that I'm wearing a shirt that I might easily consider one of my father's shirts also. It's a title that came to me as I considered my relationship with my father, and for that matter, with my grandfather and great-grandfather. We were all given the first name of George. We all had the last name Slade. We all kind of came from a solid family tradition where we were the oldest child of oldest children, and we're sort of born into a preppy, business-minded community here in the Midwest. And so I always had the feeling like, metaphorically, I was sharing the shirts that my father wore. And the book, I wasn't sure that I was writing a book until I spent a couple of years working on it. The book pointed out to me that shirts became something much more metaphorical, that I shared this sort of skin with him. That the shirt became something that that linked us in a formal sense, but also I do wear his shirts. They fit me much better than his pants do, and it's a sense of connection and at the same time distance that I feel when I wear his shirts. It's sort of like, this was his life. My life is a little different, but I can feel his life. I can feel his life through my skin when I wear one of his shirts.
Okay. Now, I do want to mention, because you just shared with me that your father just recently passed.
That's right.
Just a couple of weeks ago. So we want to share our condolences with you and wrap you in love. And what a nice way to be able to honor him, though, and his legacy.
I know. I've been looking back through the book, and I can feel that the emotions ratchet up as I look at these pictures. And I might not have recognized it at the time while I was doing it, but I definitely am seeing in retrospect how the project is just so heartfelt. I mean, obviously it's mine, so it's heartfelt, but it really taps into that kind of close attention that you can really only give a loved one. Someone who, and I should mention, well, it's a whole nother topic related to COVID and quarantine, and the opportunity that the disease gave me to spend really close time, really, just in his room, basically, two of us in his room over a period of 4 to 5 months, where I was able to visit, and I would be there 3 to 4 times a week giving him his breakfast. Sorry, I'm kind of rambling. Where was I?
Oh, you're fine. You're telling your story, and saying how COVID, gave you that space, to really be together. And,
ironically.
Yeah. And I think, and then when you mentioned just being in his room, I mean, you're not being together and being out and about and social. I mean, it's this closed situation where it's just the two of you.
Right. Sitting where our toes can touch, basically, or actually my knees were often touching his knees as I would feed him.
And what a neat opportunity to switch things up, because I'm sure it just you probably fed them at different times throughout, but to have it be that consistent and that close of a time frame, it looks different. It's got to feel different.
Well, and that's the nature of the time and the attention that I was able to pay.
Mhm.
It's like I really started to get a sense of, my presence there, what my presence, how it was mattering to him.
Mhm.
And then at the same time, how much he was really on this journey by himself. He was definitely in spaces that only he could understand.
Mhm.
I mean,
You
I
know what?
think we want to project so often and say, oh, well, he was definitely happy this day, or, he was really looking at me and seeing me. And I don't always believe that to be the case. I think there's, a large part of the Alzheimer's sufferer's life that we can only imagine.
Mhm. Well, one of the things when I look through your book, to me, it's a legacy, but it's also in sharing it, it's helping other people learn how to document, and then it's also educational. But it's not just your dad's story; it's your story with your dad as well.
Oh, yeah.
That takes a lot of bravery to publish that, and a lot of courage to open the door to something that intimate.
It's I think you're right about that, Lori. It does take courage. I think that I learned that from my father. I think that he gave me a kind of curiosity and willingness to go into sort of questionable spaces, just
Mhm.
spaces where you might not be always aware of what your answers were going to be.
Mhm.
Um, and the question that I've had and that I had to kind of deal with was, would your father have approved of this, of publishing this material? And it really kind of took me aback, because it had never occurred to me that he wouldn't approve.
Mhm.
I think he, not because he was an egomaniac, not because he just loved seeing pictures of himself.
Mhm.
And I don't think he would have objected because of the signs of the Alzheimer's. But I think that he approved of my curiosity.
Mhm.
I think that he liked the fact that photography gave me a reason to ask questions and to look closely. And I have to believe that the gift of attention here really made a difference to him.
Oh, for sure.
And
You
it
know,
and it made a huge difference for me too.
yeah, because it's the gift, of documenting everything, but it's from his perspective. I can only imagine what a gift it was to see how much you care.
Right.
You
And
know,
and, it,
to take
and
that time to take those photos. I remember with my mom was in a nursing home, for example, and I took out a camera one day to take a picture of her, and I said, "Okay, let's say cheese." And people that were sleeping with their heads down all popped up and smiled, because everybody knows what that means. And a photographer can
hmm,
not well, nowadays they can take a picture without paying attention by just yanking their arm up with their iPhone and stuff. But in the day, when someone took a picture, that was
it,
100% plus attention on you.
it was an event.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
really was.
For the book and for the work that I've been doing, the camera had to become like an extension of my hand.
Mhm,
There's no way I could sit there and frame a photograph,
mhm,
holding a single lens reflex and adjusting f-stops and focus. I had to use this device,
mhm,
this device that we all carry around in our pockets, because if I was photographing with my left hand, I could be feeding him with my right hand,
mhm.
and so the camera had to become less of an event It had to become sort of a non-event.
Mhm.
Also, I mean, I don't know how much Dad was ever aware of being photographed, but I certainly know that at times he would be reaching out to grab hold of this object I was holding in front of
Uh-huh.
him.
Oh,
So
interesting.
I have some funny pictures of him with his hand coming up like this and onto the camera.
Enough already, enough. No.
Yeah, bug off,
Yep.
paparazzi,
Or,
beat it.
or yeah, or maybe it's my turn,
Right.
let me take some
Oh,
of yours,
oh,
I mean,
well, that would have been interesting.
yeah, you just don't know. Well, what made you decide to write the book? When usually there's a turning point for someone. You said I didn't really know I was writing a book in the beginning and stuff. What was your turning point to go, yeah, this needs to be a book?
Well, I'm deeply involved in photography, the photographic arts, and photographic bookmaking.
Mhm.
Strangely enough, it didn't occur to me to think about this project as a book until maybe a year or so into the Instagram posts. Someone who I respect, who's a book editor, suddenly put on her book editor hat and said, I think the book editor in me sees this as a book.
Mhm.
And I was a little taken aback, like, whoa, gosh, why didn't I think of that? And so I started to sort of ponder how it might turn into a book. And at one point, I even made a little Shutterfly book, or just a little like mock-up of
Mhm.
a book that looked like this, just for my own sort of reference. And when I showed this little project to a book designer, they got very excited about including Instagram and all of the language and exchanges and support that happened on Instagram into the final book. So I have a very traditional mindset in some ways, sort of the my father's shirts part of my design, that would have the design of a photo book be super simple and not have a lot of captions and just images. But when I started to think about it as a book, it really became obvious that I could use the book as a way of describing my journey, and how I found support during the 3 really intense years that Dad was in memory care.
What made you pick the bright color, yellow?
I was hoping you would ask me that, because right here I have the turtleneck that he wore for several of throughout the book, and you'll notice it's more or less the same color.
Yep.
If
Yep.
you flip through the book, occasionally you'll come across pictures of this turtleneck, and it's so striking. It's a color that my friends in high school told me never to wear.
Yep.
And my father was never afraid to wear it. So to a certain extent, it sets off the conventional notion of his sort of non-fashion. Yep. That these kind of formal business shirts, the button downs, the cotton Oxford cloth shirts, were offset by some of his choices, which were very quirky. And
Yeah.
that yellow turtleneck is definitely foremost among them. So I wanted to honor that in the book cover.
You have such great photos. Like I just love this one.
Thanks.
I
Yeah.
just love this one. What made you do half the face versus most people would think you would do a whole face?
I think that's where all the interesting stuff was.
Mhm.
At that moment, I was looking at him, and that was where the illumination was best. And I just loved all his wrinkles, and it became so difficult to find that twinkle in his eye, that I really wanted to close in on that. And that was about as close as you can get with this camera phone, and really have things remain in crisp detail.
Okay. What about this one here? Let's see if I can get this.
It's hard to see. It was taken while I was setting up a Christmas Zoom for my family, and Dad was kind of drowsing while we were setting up the view, and as I was puttering around, I noticed that he was sort of at rest in his seat and very relaxed. And I said, this is a moment. This is not, this may be the hardest picture in the book for some people to take, because it doesn't show him it shows him in a posture of the disease that is totally common, and was certainly, familiar within my experience of him. But it had that distancing effect. I show him on the video screen, the TV screen, as we're waiting for the rest of the family to join us.
But such a scenario that so many families went through, and so many people living with the disease went through. So I think
it's a doubling.
Yeah,
it's a doubling effect of,
yeah, really powerful. And then like this one, people might question, what were you looking at here? With the hearts on the carpet, or I don't know if you can see. I can't.
Yeah. Well, hearts on the carpet. Isn't that fun? The idea that my mother and my father and I were sitting there, 3 hearts together. And when I look at the window frame, it looks like the 3 of hearts as a playing card. That was also the last picture I took before COVID quarantine set in. Okay. So it had this sort of sweetness to it about recollecting those times when we could sit together, because there was a period of like 5 months in which we could only visit by video, and that was terrible. It just didn't work at all.
Yeah, you have like this one too is really cool with the dog and stuff. I mean, there's just such a wide variety of moments that you captured, in the book, and I just think it's fascinating. Now, is this your mom?
That's my mom.
Okay.
Yep. They had been married since 1956, and they just kept adapting. I mean, as Alzheimer's took hold, and mom had the dog. The dog moved in after dad moved out, basically. And the dog was really her dog, is still really her dog. And Sugar, Sugar was maybe the last in a series of dogs that my family will have had. Mostly Labradors and hunting dogs, but a couple of there was a toy poodle along the way that was not the wisest choice.
Well, and I would imagine, for your dad too, if he knew or not, or spiritually connected, knowing that your mom had a companion in the home, when that was your history as a family, was probably really comforting to everybody.
Right. And I think that picture is a wonderful example of my dad's spirit. Just a kindness, a curiosity, and he loved dogs. He loved living creatures of many sorts. And that gentleness of just greeting a fellow animal, a fellow creature, I think was really part of my dad's spirit. I'm thinking about spirit, and as I was witnessing my father's passing, I had in mind that there would be a moment at which someone would see a spirit leave his body. I was sort of wondering if that phenomenon would take place. And after he died, I had a feeling that it hadn't happened. But then looking at a picture like this one of Dad with the dog Sugar, it makes me realize that I witnessed his spirit leave in increments over a long period of time. Like during the time that I was photographing and making these notes and whatnot, I was witness to my father's spirit leaving him.
I know some people believe in that and some don't. I know, like when my dad passed, he had brain cancer. I had my hand on his chest and I felt the electricity go right out of his body.
Wow.
And my brother was right there, and I'm like, touch his chest. And Scott's like, I don't feel anything. But Dad and I were so connected, just so connected. And I'll never forget that moment. And people go, didn't that scare you? And I'm like, oh no, it was such an honor, such a blessing.
It was a remarkable moment. And when I say it was easy, it just had this sort of flow to it. where my siblings, all three of my siblings and I were there. We'd been there with my mother for 10 hours, basically listening to the same sounds. And when that happens over a period of 10 hours, your attention might drift a little bit. You start talking with your siblings, you start sharing observations with various people, and your attention drifts a little bit. And then all of a sudden my sister, says, "Oh, look, his eyes are open." Which was the first time in however long. And we look over at him, and it's as though he wanted to get one more glimpse, because within a minute or two after that, he was gone. Yeah. And it was so lovely. I just can't think of a nicer, I hate to say easy, because obviously it wasn't easy, but it was smooth.
As comfortable as it could be,
Right. And he died in hospice care, so there was no tubes, no bleeping monitors, no any of that. So It was incredibly graceful.
Oh, that's nice. Now, in writing your book, I would imagine, like most authors, there's some barriers that you had to jump over. Did you find any barriers for you, from anything from writer's block to funding?
As I mentioned before, the quarantine really shut down everything in 2020. And that video visits just weren't very effective. I did have some pushback from family, certain parts of my family who weren't exactly thrilled by what I was doing. And, I have taken that in stride, and I've had support from my mother all along. So, if she had objected, I think I might have had to take a different course. The book was self-published, so the idea of funding a book of this scale, it's not a $100,000 book, but it's not a $100 book either. To publish it. So I was fortunate, though, to receive almost 100% financial backing for the book from family friends, and other supporters. So it was in some ways paid for in advance.
Did you do like a GoFundMe type thing, or?
Kind of, sort of. Yeah, I did a fundraising with a platform called Fundly, and that was super helpful. And then my mother decided to write a few of her friends, and that was incredibly productive. A good amount of support in that area. I only printed 500 copies, so I'm not. Much as I would love to make a cajillion dollars doing this, it's not the reason that I decided to publish the book. It was really much more to have a way of recording this journey that I took, and to be able to share it in an easy sort of physical form with friends and family and others who might benefit from witnessing the journey.
Have you ever thought about coaching others in terms of other care partners, in terms of pulling something like this together, or documenting it just for themselves?
I have not. I've thought about sort of offering my skills as a photographer to sit with them and their loved ones, but I don't think that would work very well. Just because it was so special to me and my father. It's not that skill that I could market outside. But that would be an interesting conversation to have with someone who was thinking about documenting.
Yeah, because there are people that speak on that specifically. So even like the speaking circuit, talking about your journey and stuff, and communities, pull in their care partners and have you come out and talk about that. So that might be a way to, even supplement income if you want, or you can do it for free, or even through community ed. There's people that are interested, and that gets your name and your story out there, to a lot of people.
Great idea.
It's just, COVID just makes it a little tougher, because you don't know if a class is really going to happen, but you could do it virtually too.
Right.
As well. Right. But I think there's so many people that want to try to capture that legacy, but they don't know how to put it together. And
Well, I'd love to think that this was something that I could, if not teach someone else, at least inspire them to think about the positive aspects of doing so.
mhm. Yeah, because your book is there's the Shutterfly books where you can do this and do that, but this is different to me.
Yeah, it's
And
more substantial.
yeah, it seems like it's a broader picture of the
Mhm.
journey. And again, the reflections from you and from others, in the process and stuff. I think that sense of the community journey, supporting one another is really important.
I think that's an angle that my father's shirts takes that is not familiar, not traditional. And
Yeah.
I'm so glad that as I read it again, I'm just moved and so thrilled that there was this support. And it's something that I would encourage anybody who was thinking about documenting a journey like this to do, is
Mhm.
to not do it alone.
It brings a whole nother level together with that.
Mhm.
Did you have to go and get permissions from everybody who, on Instagram, or that's just public domain, so it's okay?
Well, I let everybody know that I was doing the book. I said, if you have given me feedback, other
Mhm.
than just an icon, a heart or something,
Mhm.
that I'm considering putting your comments in the book.
Mhm.
And if you have any problems with that, please let me know, and I'll be sure not to include your
Mhm.
words. Nobody had a problem with it, and there
Mhm.
were over 100 people who were contributors in that way.
Okay.
Every one of them was either they didn't reply,
Mhm.
and then I have to take that as implied consent,
Mhm.
or they gave me a big thumbs up
Mhm.
about it. And I acknowledge them all in the book.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think most people in the caring circle are fine because they're about awareness, they're about helping others. And so and that can really help build your community, if you decide you want to do classes or something like that, or teach people, or
Mhm.
do consultations with them, whatever. um, for them to be part of. I find when people are part of, they help spread the word, a little bit more too. And
Right.
today spreading the word, so they ain't complicated. It's like, where do you go? Because there's so many different avenues,
Well, I'm
with it
I'm really
all.
grateful to you for helping me do that a bit.
Well, my mom lived with dementia for 30 years, and the isolation and the disconnectedness that you can feel on this journey, and that was way before COVID hit, but
Mhm.
just like, where do you go? What do you do? How do you what are the options? I mean, it's to me, it's inspiring and it's hopeful to hear stories of what others are doing. How are they coping on their journey? Because I think there's nuggets in everybody's journey that we can apply, and
Mhm.
that we should not only just, kind of hone in for ourselves, but that we should pass along to the next person too.
I think you're right, and I think that what my father's shirts on Instagram accomplished was really broadening the community. I mean, it
Hmm.
wasn't just it wasn't just me and one other person. It was me and everyone on my Instagram feed.
Yep.
And they could read the comments that someone else had made, and then feed off of those.
Hmm.
And it just had this wonderful kind of tumbling quality. Like
Yeah.
people would get wrapped up in some of the side dialogue,
Hmm.
and that was just lovely.
Well, back in, I think it was like 2011, I had been in the space just a couple of years. And, I was honored to be recognized by ShareCare, which is like the largest health and wellness, company on the web, and Dr. Oz as the number one influencer for Alzheimer's disease, which just shocked me because
Hmm.
hey, it's just me. And they were like, and I was questioning, well, how can this be? Ah, I'm just a daughter. I'm not, I'm nothing official here. I'm someone trying to make a difference, but I'm not a large organization. I'm not funded. I'm not any of those things. And they did their metrics, and what they said was exactly what you were saying. It just has legs of its own, and it just keeps going. And it's like rebirthed every time it's shared or somebody makes a comment. And I think they went like 80 metrics deep, and they said we just had to stop, but we couldn't believe the content doesn't die. And that's with yours too. When you're telling a true story, the content lives on because someone else is always going to be on that journey,
Right,
and
right.
need that information. And so developing that tribe that you've developed that believes in you and your authentic storytelling, I think that is the most powerful way of communication. I think it's the most powerful advertising tool. And yet I still see big companies trying to leverage it and botch it that aren't authentic. And that kills it, because people can tell if you're real or not.
Yeah, yeah.
There's a really big difference.
Well, I think that the work that I've been doing is so specific. I mean, I think this is a truism that I always operate on, which is that the more specific you are, the more specific you can be, the more broadly understandable your story ends up becoming. So I've been, tasking myself with being as clear, as detailed, as focused, and as first person as I possibly can be. And that the story, as a result, it resonates with a lot of people.
Well, because it's not a singular journey. We're all just kind of stones thrown in the pool, and there's this big old ripple effect. And I just think there's such beauty and power in storytelling, and telling the good, the bad, and the ugly, because life's not perfect. It wasn't before dementia, so stop blaming it all on dementia. It's just the world we live in, and it's how are we going to deal with that? How are we going to live graciously alongside this disease, which your book is a beautiful display of?
Well, thank you. Yeah, I was going to say something, and now your compliment has sort of derailed me.
I think it's just so important to feel comfortable with our own situations, because we're not alone. And I think so often we feel alone, we feel isolated, and that gets us down, that gets us depressed. We don't feel supported. But what I found anyways on my journey, and it sounds like you did with yours, as you share it, it's people just kind of pop up all over the place. And it's just like, oh, I've been affected by that. Really? And they are like so eager to talk to somebody who's on the same path, who's not going to think that they're crazy.
Right.
And they're not going to judge them for the various feelings that they have throughout this journey. That's another, I think, big myth that needs to get like slapped down is, you have to be the perfect care partner. Well, you know what? We have this range of emotions from the day we're born till the day we die, and they're not going away because someone got a diagnosis of dementia. As care partners, we're going to have our good days and bad days just like they are.
Well, and I think here's one, maybe what I was trying to get at before, but there's not a switch. It's not as if, someone gets a diagnosis of mild cognitive impairment and all of a sudden, whoop, they are doomed. That's the end of their life. I mean, certainly there's that pool. I mean, you just sort of start at the shallow end and you keep going, and the person that changes, but they don't stop being the person that their ability to feed back to you changes.
And we have to look at how are we communicating? What are we picking up on? We have to rely more on those nonverbal skills that we all have, but we kind of ignore, just like we ignore the impact that music can have on us, or film that can have on us, because it's day to day in our life. We're really not paying attention to the significance of those things. And I found like little kids were just like bright little light bulbs, because they don't see any of the exterior barriers. They don't see any of the loss. They just see a person to play with and engage with.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I think that's what they teach us, that, hey, they're still there. It's different, but who cares? We can still
My,
have fun.
yeah, one of my most heartfelt memories of his process of dying was my
Mhm.
17-year-old son coming in and the night before he died, and just being so open, just being so present for him, saying goodbye and, touching him on the shoulder and saying, "Well, see you tomorrow, Grandpa." And it just, I don't know, it was as moving to me as anything else that has, that happened in the course of that grief and bereavement journey.
Yeah, I think our children have so much to teach us. They look at the world very differently. Sometimes we like the way they look at it, sometimes we don't, but that's never ever going to change. That's
Mhm, mhm.
that's just the way it is. I think this is, like I said, just a brilliant book that you've put together, and so many things that people can sit back and go, oh yeah, I
Mm.
I know that, or I could do that, or mom does this or dad does, it
Or
doesn't
yeah,
matter.
or I recognize that. I
Yeah.
recognize, I didn't expect to see it in your book, but there it
Mhm.
is. This
Yep.
thing I know too.
So it's not a secret anymore. And there's comfort in releasing those secrets that we don't even feel like we're hiding, but it's just a matter
Mhm,
of, you think no one else knows. I mean, there's just comfort in that. I think that's one of the biggest comforts in the journey, is not feeling alone, and feeling
mhm.
heard and understood. Again, if you're the person who's diagnosed, or if you're somebody caring for them, it doesn't really make much difference there.
Well, people get caught up a little bit in what I sometimes refer to as a dignity trap,
Hmm.
where they're never sure, how to protect their loved one's dignity, and the loved one isn't asking them to. This is something that the family members kind of come up with, like, oh, dad wouldn't want that. It just isn't dignified.
Hmm.
And I have to revert to my sense that we really don't know what that person would want, and we dignify them by being respectful of their individuality.
Hmm.
You know,
Yeah, I have a picture of my mom that I adore, that my brothers just think is so disrespectful. And she was at the nursing home, and they were all dressing up like Klondike Kates, for for a
Mhm.
winter festival here in Minnesota. So she had a red feather boa on, and bright red lipstick, and a hat. Oh my God, but her smile was just huge, and the glint in her eyes, she was having a ball. And
Yep.
they were like, that that is not mom. That is not. And
Right.
I'm like, that is mom being joyful. What is so wrong with that?
That is the dignity fallacy right there.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, and it really is a trap. And I in fact, on my other show on Tuesday, we were talking about this, where I got mad at my parents' friends because they invited them to go down to Texas, and there's no way they could drive or maneuver an airport. I mean, my mom had dementia, my dad had brain cancer, and then I had to sit back and look at myself going, why would they do that? And it's like, because you never told them what was going on, Laura,
Right.
and I would
Right.
go over there, and I would make sure my dad was all shaved, because he would miss spots and stuff, and that they were all, dressed well and had money, to pay. And then their friends would come pick them up, and then they would
Mhm.
go out and they'd reminisce like old times. And so
Mhm.
they didn't see any differences. They didn't, and it was like, okay, that's my fault. And I didn't even know that I was doing that. I just thought, well, they would like to look how they've always looked with their friends. And I didn't give any thought to hiding the disease.
You know what? One of the most amazing parts of this process has been for me, watching people the workers, the resident,
Mhm,
the aides and
mhm,
whatnot who work um, in my dad's memory care unit, have only known him since he was there in memory care
mhm,
and as a hospice patient. And they came after he died, they came in and spoke to us, and hung out and just, were there with him. And
Mhm.
the fact that they were so moved by him, that they
Mhm.
had a chance to know him, get to know him over a couple of years. They knew him in a way that was in some ways more profound than any of us because they were
Mhm.
with him every day. And they saw a character to him that was similar to what we knew, and the fact that he was able to carry that character through even to a place where we didn't recognize him anymore.
Mhm.
So beautiful.
Yeah, I know the feeling of that. When my dad died, I actually got a card from one of the workers, and she said he was my dad too.
Oh,
I was
wow.
like, oh,
Wow.
she said I didn't have a relationship with my dad, and he
Wow.
treated me like a daughter.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and so, and I think sometimes families don't understand how profound those connections are with the
Mhm.
staff, and that they're grieving too. And I don't always know that companies really take that to heart either, in terms of serving their staff and supporting them through that. This isn't a, just a circular door. Get used to it. Get used to it. When someone touches your heart, it's not a task anymore. It's much deeper than
Mhm.
that, and it needs to be
Mhm.
respected.
I would love to make a shout out to them if that was okay.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. The staff, the Ecumen Hospice staff at Abaton,
Mhm.
Abaton Mill City in downtown Minneapolis, they were saints and angels. I just am so lucky that we had the opportunity to be with them. Dad
Oh,
was so lucky.
that's fantastic. Well, in the company you work for, Gentle Transitions too, they
That's
help
right.
so many families. I used
Including
to.
us. I had my sister hire them to clean Dad's room out.
They're absolutely amazing on so many different levels. And again, it's about sharing those nuggets with people, letting them know, what are your thoughts, how did
Mhm.
it work. Those are important things to do, and businesses and individuals alike need those kudos too. It
Right.
pushes them to do better and more of it.
Hmm. And not many of us get to go through this more than once or twice. So
Yep.
it's really great to have the shared knowledge available, you know, from scores of people who have gone before. So to have that knowledge compiled somewhere is really beneficial.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. That's an excellent point. How does it feel for you to be a published author now?
Oh, I'm gosh, I wish there was like some moment at which the lights went on and ta-da. It was such a slow and sort of step-by-step process. Was
Mhm.
I a published author at the moment that I saw the book for the first time, or the moment that I accepted 17 boxes of the book?
Mhm.
um, it's great. I'm really happy that the book has been produced for so many of the reasons that we've been talking about. I have a couple of events that I'm doing coming up, which will feel like public moments when people will, get a hold of the book,
Mhm.
and it starts to get into more people's hands. I think that's going to make a big difference for me when more people start to see it.
Well, George, is there anything else that you'd like to say? This has just been a wonderful conversation, and I so
Oh,
appreciate your time.
well, Lori, I've been thrilled to be here. It's been special.
I know your dad will be proud for sure. I mean, it's to have someone care enough to document your journey. I mean, wow, that states a lot. Now, people can get a hold of you by phone or text
Hmm.
at 651-227-9549. But make sure
Hmm.
that you know who the heck you are and why you're calling, so you don't get brushed off to spam, because we all get a lot of those
Exactly.
calls.
Exactly.
And then people could also email you at georgegilbertslade@gmail.com.
Right.
I was just going to say, in the book again is My Father's Shirts.
Right. And you
And
can order that through my website, which is georgeslade.photo.
again, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it, George.
Ray, it was great to join you. Thanks again.
Thank you. In wrapping up, I just want to again say thank you to our audience. I hope you really enjoyed this show, and I hope that you pass it along. Like, click, and share. People need this information. And also, I wanted to give a shout out to the Alz authors. If you're caring for somebody on this dementia journey, you're going to want to check out alzauthors.com. They have over 300 authors in a variety of genres that you can find some wonderful, wonderful books. It's probably the most comprehensive collection out there. Go to alzauthors.com. They also have a podcast you're going to want to check out too, called Untangling Alzheimer's in Dementia.